My name's Patrick Maloney. Most all my friends call me Mo. You know, I liked motorcycles and hot rods long before I could drive. I remember looking out the window of the family car when I was a kid, and my mom would see me eyeballing that guy on a Harley and just knowing it was just burning her up. I was born and raised in the suburbs of Chicago. 4 kids, I was the youngest, always something going on. Where I grew up in the burbs, I remember the busiest intersection right near my neighborhood had corn on all 4 corners. You know, we had a lot of pretty good sized farms right there in Des Plaines, Illinois. We hung out in the woods, you know, we ride our bicycles through the woods and go fishing, swimming in the lakes in the summer. There was a lot of industrial ed in my high school. I mean, I literally could stick and TIG weld before I got out of high school. Most of my dad's friends were electricians and this and that, and different kinds of blue-collar guys, suburbia. It was a lot more with guys within my peer group. I really can't think of one of my friends' dads that was into cars. It's not that they discouraged us or anything. My friend Dave, his dad had a tank shift pan in the garage, and I never saw him ride it. His pan, just like mine, went the way of paying for some private school. When I was first getting into biking in the Navy, I kind of inherited some torch stuff, and then I traded some stuff for a set of oxygen and acetylene tanks. And I had a good heavy-duty half-inch drill motor, and I was literally considered the local machinist among my circle of friends that had motorcycles. And I owned a paint gun and a multimeter. I never had a street bike until I joined the Navy. I had some dirt bikes and mini bikes when I was a kid. Joined the Navy, and I really was not doing that well the first couple of years. I sort of had a life-changing experience and pulled it together. My new obsession was motorcycles. The Navy was cool. We always had a group of guys. All the guys on the ship that rode Harleys always hung out together. Every ship has, you know, necessity for its own machine shop. It has necessity for its own pretty good welding department. When you're underway, anything that breaks or anything that wants to get modified or moved, you don't have a place you can go. You've got to do it yourself. I took care of everybody on the ship that needed any motorcycle stuff done. But there were machinists too, and they could, you know, they could make you a nice part. Nowadays, in some ways, this shop's equipped better than some of those shops. But back then, you know, it was a big deal to help a guy make a sissy bar or weld a hardtail onto his Triumph. When I was about 21, I got my first street bike. I bought it from a friend in Chicago and took it back with me to Charleston, South Carolina. And it was a '69 Triumph Bonneville with a big long jammer springer, and that's how I got into biking. 6 months later, I bought another one. Probably another 6 months later, I bought a knucklehead rolling chassis with a pair of chrome Invader wheels on it and a Jocklid 4-speed transmission, candy red over gold. I still got the shift knob for it out in that shed. I kept looking for motors, and I could not believe it, but I finally, right in the middle of a trailer park, I found a knucklehead motor with a folder full of receipts, people transferring it from one guy to another over the course of time. Bought that motor for $350 in 1982. Built that motor in a shed. Didn't have electrical power out there, had a Coleman lantern, and if I needed power, I would borrow a 100-foot extension cord from work and run it out there. I was taking parts with me from that shop and taking it to the ship I was on and doing work on it. You know, if I needed to bead blast something, I had access to it on the ship. If I had needed a drill press, I could get it done there. 1986, I got out of the Navy. I was in Norfolk, Virginia. I moved to Gloucester County, about probably 90 minutes away. Believe it or not, I went to work in a blacksmith shop. It was my first experience with trip hammers and forging and forming steel, and we had coal delivered by the dump truck and literally used regular coal-fired forges in the 1980s. It was filthy, but I mean, it was another huge learning experience. That was a year where I really learned a lot, but at the same time, if I had an idea and threw it out there, he'd try it. Some of our trip hammers were over 100 years old at the time. They all had flat belt pulleys, and they had been converted to electric motors. They all would have run off of drive shafts in the ceiling of shops. Except for one, it was so big we had to keep it out back, and it had a 2-cylinder diesel engine running it. One slam sounded like a gunshot. I didn't have a telephone. The internet wasn't invented. But I was living here in Jacksonville, and I didn't have a phone, but people always found me. And my garage, even then, was probably the best equipped. I had a smaller lathe and a drill press and a small stick welder. But my friend's Wayne's garage was a lot more active, and it always had 4 or 5 guys every night till 10 o'clock, lights on, working on something. And we didn't even care. We'd take something in that we didn't even know the guy and help him build a running motorcycle out of it. We really didn't care. We were out in the garage having a good time. People have to want it. That's the only thing I could see stopping anybody nowadays from doing it. Everybody talks about wanting to be able to do it, but they're not doing it, They're not. Just go get the tool and learn to use it. My high school was in the suburbs of Chicago. It was a huge industrial area. Everywhere you went, there would be whole, square mile blocks, and there wouldn't be anything in there but factories full of people working on stuff, fixing stuff, or manufacturing products, but all the machinery needed repair, And my high school had 5 wings, and one whole wing had 2 wood shops, a metal shop, a machine shop, an auto shop with 5 lifts and a paint booth. You could do anything. Kids built anything in high school. I built my first engine stand there. Where does a kid learn it nowadays if he doesn't go to work in a place that has the equipment? I got jobs because of the training I had before, but these kids have to find a job that'll train them, or the military. Military's a big deal. Believe it or not, I got out of the Navy and I had about 3 years, 4 years dabbling in other stuff, including new ship construction. And then I went into aviation for the Navy, and I started fixing aircraft. I got a lot of training in my different careers. The Navy was a huge big deal. I did carpentry, new construction, house building, remodeling, and it seems like everything you do, you can get a takeaway from it. A thing I call tape measure common sense. If a guy right out of the chute can't handle a tape measure, it's probably best that he goes into something else. If he can use a tape measure, you can teach him to use a micrometer. You could teach him to read the dials on a mill or a lathe. Me and my son went to the turkey rod run. He was about 8 years old. We saw another hot rod with an early Hemi like that one and a blower, and I fell in love with that motor. And within 90 days, I found a core early Hemi and bought the engine. Took a few years to get it rebuilt, and then I still didn't have a car to put it in. A friend of mine, as a gift, he had a bunch of steel left over from a job, and he gave me 48 foot of the 2x3 tubing that I made the frame out of. Traded a knuckle motor for that metal Ford Model A body to one of my best friends up in Indiana. every bit of it was hand built, and it was built in that other garage over there. We were just walking around and we saw this car, and it was just incredible. It had eight carburetors, magneto, 671 blower, early Hemi, zoomy pipes, slicks on the street, and it was loud, it was nasty, it was flat black, and I fell in love with that motor, and I said, I gotta find one of those. This pile of parts, I mean, like, I've had those triple trees for 25 years probably. Judging by the tire, I've probably had that back wheel for 30 years. The motor I bought about 5 years ago out on the west side of Jacksonville, right here. It had a lot of problems, had to take it apart. I remember where I get stuff. I know it's weird, like that transmission case, I know who owns the motorcycle it came out of. The guy put electric start on that particular panhead, and I wound up getting the case for free. That case has a hole punched in the back of it, you could see right now. He had a plate screwed on there with half a dozen sheet metal screws and ran it that way for 25 years before I got it. I'm going to weld a little plate over that hole, and I'm going to stuff a transmission in that case because I got it. They're a little hard to get, and I know it's got history, and I don't even care if it has weld repairs on it. That's kind of the way I am with a lot of parts, and I could show you in my shed a million parts and tell you exactly where they came from, you know. Might be part of what I'm trying to keep alive is those memories, you know. I've had a pretty good colorful past in the motorcycle scene, you know. I met the guy that invented Supermax belt drives and been in his shop. He's a terrific guy, and he's a hands-on guy, and he loves sharing knowledge and information. I've met Brother Speed Finley out of Charleston, South Carolina, and I remember parking next to Speed Finley, and him and I were already friends, and him and I having a hand kickstart contest. Him with that magneto shovel pan, and I knew that motorcycle when it still looked like maybe a little toned down show bike, but at one time it was a show bike, and I remember it when it still had the graveyard scene on the tank in probably 81, 82. You know, I remember him telling the tales about riding that bike up the Alcan Highway through Canada and into Alaska. His derby cover is a cast aluminum bust of a young lady, like from here up, and I remember when it wasn't ground down so far on the bottom. It's been on there that long, and I think he used to refer to it as old lady number 4 or something like wife number 4. He's a good fella. He's another piece of the puzzle. That's it. You know, he's a colorful part, but he, you know, he's got stories, and he's the real deal. I couldn't believe it because I lived in Charleston, and I got into biking around guys like him. Used to be cycle accessories on Phillips Highway. My first shop I went to when I moved to Jacksonville, probably living here about a year, and I go there one Saturday morning, and Speed had just woke up. He was sleeping in front of Cycle Accessories with that motorcycle. He had to pull over. They told him he couldn't ride it any further. It was nighttime, and his generator had quit working, and he was trying to make it to Charleston on the magneto alone. We went in and got him enough to make some electric lights and get home to Charleston. But that bike always ran. It's a neat old motor too. It's got flathead flywheels, you know, it's one of the old flathead strokers. I remember all the hand engraving on it. When it was first built, it had a 2-throat Weber with a bunch of hand engraving on it. Kind of rough, but neat. I remember when people were putting shovel valves in pans, not shovel valves, but Chevy valves, Chevy 202s. And I wish I'd have known a little more when I was a kid, because when I built my first knuckle, all you could buy is these bronze Gary Bang valve guides. And, you know, if I'd have known then that I could buy some valve guide material from Ampco or somebody like that, that makes valve guides, I would have been making my own knuckle guides back then, because the bronze guides, they'd melt and stick the valves open. Gary down in D-Land, he'll put you brand new seats in an old set of pan heads. He'll do almost any welding on them they need. It was sad, but there was times when my knuckle sat on the pier. Maybe not during a long cruise, but during workups, we just all chained them up together on the pier, and that's where they, because some of us lived on the ship. Now, if I had a place out in town and they didn't give you any money to live out in town, but it was sad. But I remember getting off the ship with snow on the ground in Virginia, and the first place I went was right up to that knucklehead and fire it up. We rode all winter in Norfolk. Never gave it another thought. A lot of times I didn't have a car. If there was a chance that I could buy another motorcycle or some parts, and I had to sell my car to do it, I did it. I remember when I wanted to put a coat of Corvette yellow on the knucklehead. Somebody let me borrow a space to do it with that gas air compressor, and I did all the sanding by hand. And again, this was another space that didn't have any light. I remember sleeping on cardboard in the shop, getting up and painting all day for, I think I slept there 2 nights, and got a perfectly painted set of tanks, fender, and frame out of the deal. The copper tanks on the flathead I hung from the engine cherry picker, and there's a $100 copper colored stain on the driveway where the cup fell off the spray gun. And if you know how much good metallics cost nowadays, I got out of the Navy in January of '86 and moved here by Christmas that same year. Typical, I'd pick a house by the garage it had. This shop is this size because this is the biggest the city of Jacksonville would let me have. 1,200 square foot house, 600 square foot garage. The machinery on wheels helps a lot. I am blessed to be able to store and fix bikes and store 2 cars, work on them. It's good. My name's Patrick Maloney. I'm from Jacksonville, Florida, and I'm a Dennis Kirk garage builder.